I always encourage you to read the post, not because I write it, but because the Lord inspires it, I believe, to inspire you and encourage you. And I hope that somehow, some way, something you've read will touch you, will resonate with you, will bless you today. And that as a result of our experience in church here today, we will all be blessed. We will all say, it was great to be in God's house today. Amen. God does have a blessing for each one of us when we come together and we worship collectively in His house and His sanctuary. So, storm-proof Christianity. You're wondering what I'm talking about. Well, today, if you've not learned as a believer, as a Christian, as one who takes God at His word, if you have not developed storm-proofing in your life, then I hope that this message will challenge you today. How many of you have been through a storm before in your life? Let me see you raise your hand. Okay, no. Let me ask you that. How many of you really been through a storm? I'm not talking about some namby-pamby, dinky, I'm talking about a storm that strikes fear in your heart. Okay, some of you will know this. Some of you who live in Canada may not have experienced. Some of you from other parts of the world might have experienced what it means to be. Those of you from perhaps the Philippines and from the Far East Asia, from the Caribbean islands, from there are some storms that are, pardon? Yeah, that's not right. From the islands, and we have our elder from Jamaica, and many places experience some very devastating storms. In fact, is this working? Let's see if it's working. Let's see. There is a storm that just passed through the eastern seaboard. We just prayed for them today. I think we have a problem here. But let's see. Can you advance the slide? When a storm comes, what do you do and where do you go? There are warnings for storms, right? So they tell you to seek shelter. They tell you to actually retreat. They tell you to evacuate. And unfortunately, many people don't listen because they've got it. In fact, I was reading a report from CNN, and they had warnings in the Carolinas. And a lot of people did not heed the warning because they have been through many storms. We've had storms before. We've lived through the storms. Surely it's not going to affect us or touch us this time. That was their thinking, their belief. But for them, the time comes when the storm that they have survived through and the storms they've survived through, maybe this one storm might be the one that would affect them. And unfortunately, did you know the story? Actually, many families lost their lives. Families who could have been saved, could have been spared, they lost their lives. Some children were swept away. Some members of the family were swept away in the flooding waters of the storm. In fact, we heard a lot of livestock was destroyed. Some of that livestock was actually pigs. I can't remember. Now, some of you might be saying amen because you don't eat pig, but that's not the point. The point is still, they're all God's creatures. And it baffled me that people could get warnings from the news, from the authorities, and still they don't comply. They don't heed the warning. I'm wondering, why is it? Is it because they're so comfortable they don't want to let go of what they've established, maybe their housing, their investments, their assets? They don't want to let it go because too much has consumed. I don't know what it is. But how is it then that people who understand the dangers that exist, they don't take heed to the warning? How about us as believers? How about us as Christians? When God gives us a warning from His Word, a warning in the times in which we're living in, a warning to be careful, a warning to be vigilant, a warning to wake up, a warning that a storm is coming. What do? Do we prepare ourselves to evacuate, or we just stay there? I've got this. It won't get me. It won't touch me. It won't touch my family. Here it is. Florence, the history of Florence. So it started somewhere in August 31st, so a couple of weeks back, and now today's the 22nd, so just about four days ago. This was very recent how the storm started. So you can see August there, the storm was beginning here, and then September 1 it becomes a tropical storm, and then from the first it moves to strengthening into category 4. Now it became a category 4. I think category 5 is the highest, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But then when it came to land, it actually got downgraded, but becomes a 4 here on September 10th. Then it weakens to a tropical storm, and then finally, when it hits the land, the coastal area, it's downgraded to category 1. It's quite interesting to see the development of a storm. So storms develop by cool air rising, and then that cool air, of course, there causes constant condensation. The water vapor condenses, and then as the water vapor condenses, it creates these cumulus clouds. These cumulus clouds are the angry clouds, if you want to call them. Some children call them angry clouds. And then, of course, what after that, after these cumulus clouds are created and formed, it releases heat, and it is the heat then that develops storms, thunderstorms. And then as that process continues, the thunderstorm intensifies and increases. So that's just a snapshot, as it were, of how a storm develops. And I'll tell you a story about a storm that I was in, but that's toward the end of the sermon, so you got to stay. You can't leave, okay? So just stay with me for the next few moments together. So you've seen pictures of storms. This is actually a picture. This is actually a pic of the storm that hit the coast there. Here's a jetty, and right off the coast there, and it is getting battered, and it's getting hit hard. Most of it was collapsed. I mean, you're talking about millions of dollars of damage. Millions of dollars. And this is just a picture, a recent picture of what it looked like. Poles went down, homes were devastated and destroyed, demolished in the storm. I mean, because it's not affecting us, sometimes we okay, well, you don't feel the weight, the gravity of the loss. But if you've ever been in a storm and you experience a loss, you can only imagine what these people are experiencing, what they're going through, how they're grieving. Storms is a part of life. If you've not been through a storm, then just keep on living. The storms will surely come. But I want to talk to you today about storm-proof Christianity. How can we have that? Winston Churchill wrote this book, The Gathering Storm. This was his reflections of pre-World War II and then into World War II. Some of you have been born and have family from that part of the world, the UK, Germany, and all that places of Europe that were affected by this war. But he wrote this book, and I skimmed through it. I was perusing it, and this is what he writes. It's an excerpt from the book. He says, mankind, of course, which refers to humanity in general, has never been in this position before, without having improved appreciably in virtue or enjoying wiser guidance. It has got into its hands for the first time the tools by which it can unfailingly accomplish its own extermination. Did you hear that? That this is the point in human destinies. Hold on. You gotta focus on this. That is the point in human destinies to which all the glories and toils of men have at last led them. They would do well to pause and ponder upon their new responsibilities. Death stands at attention, obedient, expectant, ready to serve, ready to share away the peoples en masse, ready, if called on, to pulverize without hope of repair, which is left of civilization. He awaits only the word of command. He awaits it from a frail, bewildered being long his victim, now, for one occasion only, his master. Did this man have a way with words?
Yes.
If you know his story, T-minus in smoking cigars. He didn't have the health message. But God raised up, God used Sir Winston Churchill. If you know his story, when he was young, one teacher said to his parents, he will never amount to anything. He's stupid. He's an imbecile. He's stuttering. He's not academic material. Another story of his life, he almost died. And I don't know if I told you that story. But a great personality who contributed to a world of saving lives by discovering penicillin was the same doctor when he was young that saved Sir Winston Churchill's life, Dr. Alexander Fleming. This same gentleman became the most unlikely prime minister in a time when the current sitting prime minister had to step down because of failing health. The only leader that remained that was unlikely for the House of Lords to vote on was Winston Churchill. Then he continues, in the problems which the Almighty sets his humble servants, things hardly ever happen the same way twice over, or if they seem to do so, there is some variant which stultifies undue generalization. The human mind, except when guided by extraordinary genius, cannot surmount, the established conclusions amid which it has been reared. Powerful quotation. He makes a reference to, I love this, the Almighty. He may not have been a regular church goer or attendee, but I believe he was of the Anglican faith. But in his leadership, he recognizes the hand of the Almighty. It was his hope in the Almighty that inspired a nation and the Allied forces to keep on going when they were actually outnumbered. If you know the history, the Allied forces were doomed for a fatal blow, but it was his inspired hope and optimism, even when the odds were stacked up against him, the government, his country, and the Allied forces, that he remained resolute in his belief, in his faith, in the Almighty, in the gathering storm. Well, let's talk a little bit more about another storm. Turn with me to Matthew chapter 8. The Gospel of Matthew. You've got to love the Word of God. You've got to love the Gospels. For in the Gospels, we get the clearest picture of Jesus. We get the clearest picture of God and His character of love. Matthew chapter 8, if you found it, would you say amen? Matthew 8, and we pick it up from verse 23. The Bible declares that when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. Now, Jesus was just coming from a busy schedule. No one was more busy than Jesus. He had appointments back to back, stacked. Every moment it was busy. And so Jesus decided that it was time for him to take a break. And so there were a few places that he went to. You remember those places, brothers and sisters? My friends, remember one of those places was the house in Bethany. Lazarus. Remember that one? So, he'd been there many times. But the second place he'd like to always go to was on the other side. The other side. Crossing over. And so his favorite sea was the Sea of Galilee. How many of you have been there? I think I've asked that question before in another sermon. It's a small sea. It's nothing to talk about, nothing to write home about. It's 13 miles by 8 miles. It is between the Jordanian mountain range and the Mount Hermon. So it is actually nestled between two mountain ranges. It's a small inland sea. But it was a wonderful sea. And when it's peaceful, it is so tranquil. It's just like those of you who like to go for walks by the lake. It's just, imagine when the sea is like Lake Placid. Calm and tranquil and sedate. However, this sea is not always calm. This sea has a temper. This sea is temperamental. This sea is moody. And as I explained to you before, how storms are developed because of the mountain ranges there, and because the way it's situated, the wind funnels in and gathers into that inland sea. There is no way of escape. So therefore it collects, it gathers, it is held there, it kind of congregates there, and as a result it creates the fury. So the Bible says in verse 24 that suddenly, and understand that Matthew's writing this, and Luke in chapter 8 also verifies it, including Mark in the Gospel of Mark. It says suddenly. Why does it say suddenly? Because, and I can testify, suddenly a violent storm arose on the sea. Okay, you don't believe me. Just a few years ago, I had the privilege of visiting the Sea of Galilee. We went on this Bible Lands tour, and of course one of the destination spots is the Sea of Galilee. So we're coming to the Sea of Galilee, and they predicted that that day the forecast is going to be sunny and calm and bright. We just entered now into Capernaum on the north side of the sea, and we just, well, there's a place called Peter's Cafe, and apparently, it's the catch of the day, So anyways, some of my unconverted my pastor friends who are not vegetarians, they ate fish. I just looked at it. It's not the same fish. It can't be the same fish. Anyways, we now are getting ready to come to the boat, and then a wild and wicked wind comes from nowhere. One of my in fact, the pastor that baptized me, he's now retired, seasoned pastor. He's wearing a cap, and he's wearing this hat, and the wind just whips off his hat. And you should see this pastor. He goes into marathon mode. He takes off to get to the hat, and he's running. I said, Pastor, no, you're going to hurt yourself. Don't go after it. And he's running after the hat, and then as he goes to get the wind, whips the hat off again into the sea. I said, Pastor, look, you know how much I love you. I'll buy you another hat in the market. Don't worry. And then rain starts coming. And the clouds, dark clouds, and I'm there, I'm testifying to you, because I saw this with my own eyes. And we board the boat, and it's raining, and some have parkas and raincoats, some have umbrellas, some don't have anything, and we're getting drenched, and the wind is just blowing, and we're praying. And in the next 15 to 20 minutes, we thought it wouldn't stop. And we started to sing songs on the boat. And we started to sing, songs of, a shelter in the time of storm. We sang this song, and would you believe, after about 20 minutes, just then there was an aperture, a little opening in the clouds. There's a rift, and then the clouds began to roll back. The beautiful rays of the sun began to scatter again. And I saw this. It was ominous. I wish I had the picture, but I didn't get a chance to pull it up. The clouds rolled back like a skull. The sun came out again, and there was a calm. This is the truth. There's no warning when you're on the Sea of Galilee. It can be a good day, and it can be a really rough day. So all of a sudden, a violent storm arose on the sea, so that the boat was being covered by the waves. But I like this. I like this because it says here that in this violent storm, Jesus is what? How do you sleep through a storm, brothers and sisters? Does anybody have any advice, any take? Can you give me any wisdom on how do you sleep through a storm? I can't sleep through a storm. I don't mind hearing the pit patter of the raindrops, and for some people it puts them to sleep, but some people can't sleep. My grandmother, whenever it rains, her arthritis starts acting up. In fact, even before it rains, she can feel her arthritis. It's a sign that a storm or rain is coming. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But the Gospel of Matthew says, chapter 5, I just want to get a perspective, a different little cross-section take from Mark. Mark actually says something really quickly, that as the storm was gathering, here, let me just find the right verse. And that Jesus actually was in the boat, and he was actually sleeping in the back part of the boat, or the hinder part of the boat. And in Luke chapter 8, I just want to quickly make a reference to Luke chapter 8 here, as I take a look at, it's amazing how each gospel writer puts a perspective. This is Luke chapter 8, verses 22 to 25. And so the Bible says in 23, that as they sailed, he fell asleep, and there came a storm or wind on the lake. Okay? So we're staying in Matthew, though. I just wanted to get a perspective. So Jesus is sleeping, and the storm is raging. Can you picture it? Can you visualize it in your mind's eye? This storm is violent. It says violent. So you can imagine, it's not just a little wind that's blowing and a passing rain or cloud. This is a violent storm that is actually rocking the boats. In fact, the other version of the gospel says that there were other boats on the sea as well. Other boats on the sea. Now, you can imagine, before I get to that, I want to go to verse 25. And the disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we are going to die. Now, maybe you don't understand. The disciples, they are experienced, most of them are experienced fishermen. At least some of them are. They are used to the sea. They've been on the Sea of Galilee. They have actually weathered many storms. They've been through some storms, but this particular storm makes them afraid. Did you hear what they got so panicked, they got terrified that they ran to Jesus. Now, they actually forgot that Jesus was there, because for a while they were panicking, crying, fear struck their hearts. They forgot that they knew the procedure. When a storm hits, you know what to do. You got to reset the sail, okay? You've got to, you need to change the direction of where you're going, perhaps, when a storm hits. They forgot that Jesus was actually on the boat for a while. And the storm was raging. How could experienced people at the sea forget how to operate, how to deal with a storm? Well, this one was far different than any storm they've ever experienced. How do I know that? Because we have some insight beyond scriptures from the writing of Ellen White that says that this storm was not a normal storm. This was an abnormal storm. But there's a reason why this storm was abnormal. Because there was a special spiritual lesson that Jesus wanted to teach his disciples and wants to teach us today. So really quickly, let's fast forward it. Jesus is sleeping. Disciples come. Lord, save us. We are going to die. In fact, in Luke it says, Lord, we're going to perish. Do you not care that we are going to die? Do you not care that we are going to perish? So they build their case up to Jesus. Jesus now gets up. Now, listen. The only person I know who can sleep through the storm is the one who is the storm stiller. Okay, no, let me just not get ahead of myself. You got to stay with me for a moment. The only person I know who can sleep soundly like a baby through a storm and not be affected or not be afraid is the one who is in charge and in control of the storm. Even when he is asleep, he's still in control. Stay with me now. We're getting into deeper waters. Are you ready? We're going to unpack this and call it a day. Then Jesus wakes up. He said to them, why are you afraid, you men of little faith? Then he got up. Now hold on. Hold on. Picture this for a moment. This is your Jesus and my Jesus. This is our Lord and my Lord. He's sleeping soundly. He did not wake up by the storm. He woke up by the call and the cry for help. Oh, wait, you're not seeing what I'm saying. Oh, boy. You all are sleeping on me today. That's okay. God will wake you up. Jesus did not get up because of the storm. He got up because somebody called on his name. Because somebody was in distress. Because somebody was sinking in the seas of life. Jesus hears the call of every cry, and he gets up. He would have slept right through that storm, brothers and sisters. Because the storm couldn't touch him. The storm couldn't affect him. The storm couldn't shake him. Because he who is in control of every storm is not fazed by any storm. He gets up. You know, it's amazing though. Jesus gets up at the right time. Sometimes the Lord allows us, many times the Lord allows us to go through some storms in our lives. He must allow us. It is our lack of faith and dependency on God that allows fear to replace that faith. It is when we forget that the Lord is on board. We forget that Jesus is right there. He's so near. God is so close that we forget to call on him. And in our fear, we become blinded. In our fear, we become paralyzed. And we forget that he who can still that storm is right there in the boat with us. How they forget, how many times you and I forget. Jesus gets up, the Bible says, and he stretches his hands. Watch it. Visualize it with me. You got to stay here with me because this is powerful. As he stretches his hands out, it looks like a cross. Let me tell you, anything that God does is not by accident. It is not a mistake. Everything that God does by him is planned and is deliberate. And there is purpose for everything God does. He stands up there at the stern part of the boat. And you know what? Did you know that part of the boat, how many of you like going boating? I know some of you, trust me. Don't try to hide. I know some of you like to go take that boat. I know that. I heard you talk. I know you guys like to go out on the lake. The stern part of the boat is the hardest part of the boat to control, and it also gets the most turbulence. That stern part of the boat, that back part of the boat. It gets that after effect. So Jesus is there. Still didn't bother him. But he gets up now, and he stretches his hand. Before he says a word, he stretches his hand out in the formation of a cross. It reminds me of when Jesus stands up and he looks over this world, this whole universe, his hands outstretched from right to left, indicating the width, the expanse of his control as far as the east is from the west. The Bible says in Psalm 103, so far has he removed our transgressions. There's 2 points on the compass that never meets. The east and the west and the east. You know that the twain shall never meet. We know that. That's a geographical fact. Jesus stands with his hands stretched out to the east and to the west. He makes his formation now, and the disciples are looking with bated breath. Their attention is arrested. What is he doing? He hasn't said anything yet. Why is he just standing there? The storm is still raging. Why doesn't he do something? But as he stretches out his hands, first, nature recognizes its creator. Oh, you're not seeing what I'm saying. Nature recognizes those hands. On the morning of creation, that was outstretched. And then he rebukes the storm, the Bible says. In the other version, Luke says, Jesus declares, peace, be still. Peace, be still. And there was a great and wonderful calm. In fact, Mark and Luke says, I think Luke says, and immediately there was a calm. As immediate as that storm came, immediately when Jesus spoke, the calm came. It's like a mother and father. Jesus stands like that mother and that father that says, hush, little child. Everything is going to be all right. Hush, stop crying. Hush, stop ranting. Hush, stop throwing the tantrum. Hush, and that baby in the presence of their parent simmers down, quiets itself, because it is in the presence of his loving mother or father, in the presence of the Creator. The winds and the seas fold their voices and their wings. They flap down because they know in whose presence they are. There is no storm in your life, brothers and sisters, friends today, that God is not aware of, that God cannot take care of. There is no storm so great, but sometimes God will allow the storms to enter into your life to get you to a point where you recognize that Jesus is on board, where you recognize you need to call on the Lord. And then as you call on the Lord, you then wait on the Lord. So the first lesson is that you need to realize that Jesus is on board. Jesus is on board, and if he's not on board in your life, you better ask him to be on board. Number two, you have to call on the Lord. He knows you're going through your storm. He's not going to let you die or get shipwrecked. He's there, brothers and sisters, but he's waiting for you and I to call him. The Bible says, and when you call him, call upon me, and I will answer you. And I will show you great and mighty things that you know not of. Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 3. Call on the Lord. And then when you call on the Lord, wait. Wait on the Lord. He will not disappoint you. Jehovah Jireh will not fail you. This same Jesus that created the world in 6 days, this same Jesus that led them in the wilderness, this same Jesus that was born as a babe in Bethlehem, this same Jesus that was predicted in the Messianic prophecies, this same Jesus who is the Son of the living God, but thought it not robbery to be equal with God, this same Jesus can stand up in your life and say, peace, be still. I don't know what storm is raging in your life, brothers and sisters. We all go through storms in our lives. Storms that affect us. Storms in our health. Storms in our marriages. Storms in our families. Storms in our spiritual lives. But God sends those storms to wake us up, for us to call upon him. After that day, those disciples were never the same again. They saw Jesus with new eyes. They saw Jesus in a new light. They had seen a little bit, because this was early in Jesus' ministry. This was the beginning part of his ministry. As Jesus was sleeping, his humanity was resting, but his divinity never sleeps. His humanity was sleeping, but his divinity was at work. I read today as we came to prayer, Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. And it says that the Lord neither slumbers nor sleeps. If you think God is sleeping, he's not sleeping. Think again. You think your storm is so great, it's so long? God knows your storm. God sees your storm. And at the appointed time, the divine appointed time, God will come through to deliver you in that storm. You know, I wrote something here, and I want to share with you. I hope you will read it, or if you read it already. Storms are a part of life. It's in the post. Someone has said that we are either coming out of a storm, that we are in a storm, or going into a storm. No one is exempt from the storms of life. And I scroll down. Through our trials, we can learn that no storm is big enough to prevent God from accomplishing His will. Big storms can roll in fast, suddenly like this one. Blue skies and days dark with worry. It can happen with one brief conversation, a diagnosis, an accident, or a life-altering occurrence. And we're left with swirling thoughts, wondering how we didn't even see it coming. It often hits us hard, leaves us flat. We can't stop the storms from happening, brothers and sisters. Friends, today we can't stop the storm. While we may not understand why God allows trials to enter our lives, we can thank Him that through them we can come to know who He is. The storm reveals who's really in charge of the storm. Because, I like this line here, the storms of life prove the strength of our anchor. Think about it. Is Jesus the anchor of your life? Is Jesus the anchor of your life? Now here's the punchline as we close. The men wondered in amazement, saying, "What kind of man is this, that even the winds and the seas obey him?" You know what Ellen White says? That as Jesus stood up, divinity flashed through His humanity. When they made this statement, it was an act of worship. They revered Jesus like never before. For He had demonstrated not only was He the Son of Man, but He is the Son of God, and that He is God. Only God can still the storm. Only God can control nature. No one else can control nature but God. You see, brothers and sisters, as we close, I pray that we will come to the same conclusion, that whatever storm we go through, and one of my grandmothers would say, "Son, after storm, there is always a calm." After a storm, there's always a calm. That somehow we would come to the same conclusion, that whatever we're going through, Jesus comes through for us, and He stands up and He speaks into your life, into your storm. "Peace, be still." We will declare with amazement, "What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the seas obey Him?" Brothers and sisters, safety is not the absence of the storm. Safety is not the absence of the storm. Safety is in the presence of Jesus. Yes. Oh, you didn't get that. You'll get that next week. Safety is not the absence of a storm. Some pray, "Lord, I don't want no storm. Don't prevent me from the storm." Safety is not the absence of the safety is being in the presence of the Lord. That is safety. That is safety. So, as we close, one of my final points for you. Takeaway points. Storm-proof doesn't mean storms won't come. Storm-proof doesn't mean that it will be smooth sailing. Storm-proof doesn't mean that you'll only have sunny days. Storm-proof doesn't mean that there will always be a perfect calm. But storm-proof means that you will be able to go through the storm. Storm-proof means that you will stay alive. And storm-proof means that you will stand, and having done all, to stand. How can you and I be storm-proof? Only when the Lord is on board. As I close, this church and God's church, and I say it with great emphasis, emphatically and unequivocally, as we, as Sir Winston Churchill, in his finite mind, declared that there was a gathering storm, I declare to you today that there is a final gathering storm. A storm and conflict in this world, but a great spiritual storm that is gathering. And the object of its attack is God's church. This church is likened unto an old ship that is sailing on the sea. Many people will jump ship. They will say, oh, I don't see the captain on the ship. Some will say, oh, the boat is leaking. Water is coming on board the boat. We better jump ship. We got to find a new ship, another ship. We are minded that this old ship of Zion will sail safely into the heavenly harbor because Jesus is still the captain of the ship. You can't see him? Maybe the storm is obscuring your vision. But he's still, his hand is still on the helm. He's still turning the wheel. I encourage you, don't jump ship. Don't jump ship. Stay on board. Stay on board. I leave you with 3 points. There are 3 points to this sermon. Well, there are many points to this sermon. But the first one is the product of the storm. Either it'll teach you to trust God or not. Then you have the purpose of the storm. It is to build your faith and to know God more intimately, more personally. Yes. Finally, the promise of the storm is that you're not alone. The Lord is on board. The storm ceases, the billows sink to rest, the clouds roll away, and the stars shine forth. The boat rests upon a quiet sea, then turning to the disciples, Jesus asked sorrowfully, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have so little faith? In fact, verse 26, I got to close with this. Just give me 2 more minutes and I'm closing. Verse 26 of Matthew 8 says, and he said unto them, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Did you hear that? The Greek word for this little faith is oligopistis, which means underdeveloped faith. It means immature faith. It means faith that has not been tested and tried and true throughout time. This is what Matthew is writing to us. It's a faith that lacks confidence or trust too little. Underdeveloped faith. It's a faith that has doubt, distrust, an element of unbelief. Is that the faith God wants us to have in these last days? No, brothers and sisters. He wants us to have a well-developed faith, not an underdeveloped faith, but a faith that matures. And what matures our faith is the storms of life. What matures the great oak trees are not sunny days and cool breezes, but what matures those towering, majestic oak trees and sequoia trees is the storms of life. So thank God when you're going through a storm, call on his name. Recognize that he's there. Call on his name and wait on him to act, because he will surely declare, peace, be still. He will. He will. Do you know him? Do you know him today as I close? He is awesome. He is amazing. He is the man for all seasons. He is my Savior. He is my Redeemer. He is the rock of ages. He is my anchor. He is my shelter in the time of storm. Do you know him? What manner of man is Jesus to you, I ask? Do you know him? How much do you know him? How much do you love him? Your answer to that question will determine how you will go through every storm and how you will come to know him personally to know is life eternal. I was on a mission trip in the Philippines a few years ago. We have some beautiful people from the beautiful country of the Philippines here. And the Philippines are, they say on low tide, made up of 7,002 islands. That's what they say. You could Google it. It's surrounded by the Sea of China and then the Pacific, and there's the Philippine Sea. We landed in Manila and we're taking a boat to Mindoro. That day, they canceled the big ship because there was a storm. We had to get to Mindoro. We had time. We didn't have much time. They say that you could charter a small boat. I said, what? A small boat. But this boat cuts the time in half. I said, can we see the boat first? Because we were scheduled to go on a big ship. A 4-hour journey. 4 hours! They say this cuts it in less than half. In fact, you could get there in an hour. I said, that's a miracle. The storm was going to get worse. That's why they canceled the big ship. But I said, if you take the chance, you will get there to Mindoro before the big storm comes. So we prayed. And we said, Lord, if it be your will. And we said, we're going by faith. So we boarded this little thing called the super cat. With all of our luggage, with all the medical supplies, with the Bibles and the books, we came to share to that community who needed to know Jesus Christ, the light of the world. And when we went on, the beginning of the storm started to unleash itself. Ominous clouds, the lightning in the sky, and this little super cat was bouncing up and down as the waves were hitting this thing. And I said, Lord, I remembered the Sea of Galilee. I said, Lord, you are on board. And we were praying and we were worshiping in that boat. There were actually other non-Adventists, non-Christians. They were unbelievers because we didn't have the money to hire the entire boat. We only could pay. So they had other people and they listened as we sang and as we prayed. And the boat was going up and down. It was rocking. And I'm telling you, it is not because not the pilot, but the captain, that because he was experienced. It had to be the hand of God, because this boat, in fact, they were all fearful. They went and closed. You know how they open up the captain's quarters up there so that people come by and smile? And no, they sealed it. They closed it as if that was they were only protecting themselves. But little did they know that there was another captain on board that day. We got to Mindoro in just under an hour. Those people, after we came to dock, they said, who are you all? And we gave them some Bibles and tracts. And we got safely, and as we prayed, as we entered Mindoro, there was a calm on the island. There was a calm. Did you know that there were other little boats too that were in that sea? But because of the faith and the prayer, Jesus not only stilled the storm for his disciples, but he stilled the storm for the other people, so that they would come to know that there's God. Your faith, your example, can lead others to Jesus. I'm really closing now. A few years ago, when I was just a teenager, in my room, one of my favorite colors is blue. And my dad, my dad is just such a handyman. I got a gift of a picture just like this. And my dad came in my room, one day I wasn't there, and he hung the picture right over my bed. Right in the center of my bed. This is the picture. That even when you're going through the midst of a raging sea, we have an anchor. We have a lighthouse. His name is Jesus. Will you allow him to be the master and Lord of your life? If that's your heart's desire, I invite you to stand your feet with me as we close. Let our praise team to join us as we sing our closing hymn. Shelter, time of storm. I want him to be my master and Lord. How about you today?